Let's call to order the June 16th meeting for Environmental Matters Committee meeting. We, just for the record, all the members are in attendance. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda, hopefully amended to put this directors first, because they have some other business.
I so move.
I second that.
All those in favor of amending the agenda and approving it, please say aye.
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 I'm sorry, what is the amendment?
We're just putting the director's report first. So Director Johnson and then
So you have
Director
to add him
Nash.
to the agenda.
Oh, yes. So I guess first we need to add Director Johnson to the agenda.
Oh, good call. Sorry.
Thank you.
Aye.
It's been a long week. Sure. All those in
I'll
favor-
second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Move approval of the minutes.
I second approval of the minutes.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Takia.
Thank you, Takia.
And we can, these are all just reappointments, so we'll wait on those. We'll jump up to Director Johnson and Deputy City Manager, if you wanted to come on up. So I invited, and thank you for coming, I invited you here today because one of my, I guess we hadn't really gotten an update on this committee in terms of the stormwater fee, but I also, when we were going through the budget, I noticed that in the approved fee schedule, we still only had a couple of different tiers. So we had a tier for the multifamily housing, and then we had another tier just for residential, and then it jumps up to the commercial, if I'm remembering this correctly. And so my point is there was only one tier essentially for residential properties, and I thought that in one of a previous report we were going to look to go towards more of a tiered model following the counties and what other jurisdictions do with the equivalent residential unit, ERU, approach. And so I just wanted to find out if that's still the plan, or if I'm missing something. I just wanted to get an update on what the thinking is with the stormwater fee, what direction we're going, and yeah, that kind of thing. So if there's anything you could shed light on, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Based on the 2020 Stantec report, Stantec recommended that we have the following, ways of parsing the fee. There's a fee for single-family residential, and then there's a multifamily residential. Those are the two residential tiers, if you will, that exist, that were recommended we follow. The one ERU was granted for the single-family residential and half an ERU for the multifamily residential.
Okay.
And then they further recommended that we adopt 4 tiers for the commercial properties based on square footage of impervious area. Mm-hmm. So tier 1 is 5,000 and less. That's granted the same as the single-family residential, 1 ERU. Tier 2 is from 5,001 to 25,000, and that's 5 ERUs. Tier 3, 2,501 to 80,000, that's 21 ERUs. And Tier 4, anything larger than 80,000 square feet is granted 65 ERUs, is billed at 65 ERUs. And that's the structure that was adopted for fiscal year 21, mm-hmm. and will be the structure we built into our model, our rate model going forward.
Okay. And so there's 4 tiers I'm looking at for the non-residential.
Correct. Yes.
And then
2 tiers for residential.
2 for residential. Okay.
Yes.
I'm just comparing to the past reports because for some reason I thought they were originally calling for more than 2 tiers for residential, but I could be mistaken.
No, not.
Okay.
I mean, not in the report that they prepared for us. I'm not sure if there were other discussions on it, but what made it into the final report was what, as I described.
Okay. And just my colleagues, yes, I'll get to, just the benefit to the ERU approach is that it does, allows us to have an approach where it's a bit more equitable based on the actual impervious surface coverage. And in this case, I guess, allows us to charge a little bit less to the multifamily dwellings who are obviously not going to have as much impervious surface contribution. And is that
That's
correct in saying-
basically, I think the ERUs were based on the median. They looked at all the properties and residential properties and then came up with the median value. And that served as the basis for the ERU.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything was baselined against that. That baseline was compared to that baseline, calculated against that baseline.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Alderwoman?
Question, I assume that the impervious area includes driveways?
Yes.
Okay. Hypothetically, then how would you calculate if there was an accessory dwelling unit added to someone's lot? Would that be added in the analysis if the primary owner owned both?
I think that using the ERU approach, if it shifted the median, because what they're doing is looking at the entire impervious areas for all the residential properties, and then, calculating the median value. So if the accessory dwelling unit contributed to changing that, you would have a shift in where the ERU threshold is.
Okay. I guess the main thing is that it's considered.
Right, it is considered, yes.
Did you have a question?
Have we gotten any feedback, particularly from the commercial, positive or negative, about the expansion of the zones?
I haven't heard any.
So it must be just right.
Yes. So no news is probably good news. Yeah, I haven't heard anything untoward from that commercial
Good.
clientele. So to speak.
Our work here is done.
Well, I think that it's an important distinction. I think when the fees have been raised overall, but I'm guessing, and I have to look at the numbers to confirm, but that it has gone down for multifamily units, at least since it was created. 'Cause I don't think we
I
used
did
to
not look
have
at that, so I could check and get back to you. But I think that was the intent, and that was what Stantec had indicated would occur. But I did not independently corroborate that.
Did they look at, do you think it'd be worthwhile to look at creating more tiers for the residential properties? I'm just thinking, I think a benefit might be if we do have a number of properties that have a higher percentage of impervious surface, right? And if we want to kind of incentivize them to go a certain direction. But I'm not sure. We have to look at the actual JS data to see if that's even worth trying to capture.
It's something that I would raise with Dave Hyder to sort of see if that really would move the needle in any real sense. There'd be any real benefit versus the complexity of the additional billings that would have to be calculated. So I would sort of speak with Dave and be able to, determine get his opinion as to whether that's something that we should make sense for us to adopt as a city.
Okay.
And I could get back
Thank
to you
you.
with that.
Yeah. And I think it would be good, actually, if we do hear back from some of the commercial properties in terms of if we hear back from them that they don't like this, because I think that's really where we need to get with the fee, is where they do feel uncomfortable with it enough where they want to talk to us about how they can lower the fee by taking out impervious surface, putting in some kind of stormwater management. So I'm wondering if has Stantec looked at any other kind of, systems, incentives, or even penalties we should put in place to kind of encourage some of these older, and I know Dr. Nash has heard me talk about this a lot before, but some of these older properties like Watergate, which is now Nautilus, I guess, but these old apartment complexes that have zero stormwater treatment, they were put in before the stormwater laws, regs were in place. And in some cases, such as with Watergate, I know they've actually contributed $1 million or a couple $1 million to restoration projects, which is good. And I think that in itself might warrant, potential rebate or something on their fee, but they still, I think, may have how do we incentivize them to look at their own property in terms of maybe putting in permeable pavers underneath the parking lanes that lead into that, essentially under drain into the storm drain system or into infiltration system in the ground. But it seems like they may have potential or even open space where they could put a B&P, or the city could do that in partnership with them. But I'm just wondering, maybe it's something that is better served taking a softer approach in just terms of the city approaching them to see if they want to partner. But I'm also wondering if with some owners, we may just need to be a little more aggressive with our approach. Just thinking out loud here in terms of, because that's my ultimate goal is how do we get these older properties to put treatment on their property somehow, because we need to get their stormwater managed at some point.
Right. I don't believe that it was part of this particular utility rate study, but it is something, it's a good idea. It's something that, could be discussed with them to see how we could incentivize them. Not hammering them, but sort of find a way to sort of incentivize them to reduce impervious areas, particularly if they have large areas that are contributing to the fee.
Mm-hmm. Alderman?
It's funny you should mention that. My next door neighbor was having some work done on her house. They brought in a piece of heavy equipment and it crushed my driveway.
Yeah, wow.
So I was thinking, gee, for the campaign, should I put in an impervious replacement driveway? But if there's going to be incentives for anybody, I think that could be a good inducement to try to slow down all of the runoff. So I'd certainly support some legislation like that.
Yeah, and currently the incentive, at least for residential, I think it was like $5 a quarter, I think it used to be. So if you recall, misguiled, but I think that's what it was. And it's not much of an incentive. That could pay for part of the rain barrel, but
Right. It has not been changed in many years. And so we don't see we have not advertised it as actively as we plan to. I know that for part of our outreach under MS4 permit, we plan to reactivate that program and advertise it and make it known. But there's not a lot of incentive to participate when the discount is not that great.
yeah. Right.
Are there any offsets? Are there any offsets they can do? Any opportunity for a lesser fee if they do something environmentally sound?
Isn't it? Yeah, the program that...
It's the best management practice program for
EMPs.
residential. That's what we're referring to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for commercial? I think
In
it's
the commercial, they can also get credit for it. Yeah.
I think it's a little higher for commercial,
Yeah.
but it's still not.
But I mean, I do see the value in if, a commercial facility replaced their parking lot with a pervious surface.
Right,
That would
exactly.
that would be something we would want to support and provide a greater incentive to perform that kind of work.
Yeah, and maybe something.
But so we got concrete.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe, I guess that's the point of the fee is to help us to, hopefully we can use some of that money to go on these properties and put facilities on their property. But obviously that would have to be a partnership with them and get approval from them. But maybe that's something we could say to them is if they give us approval to essentially put a facility on the property using the fee money, then they get a reduced or zeroed out fee for a certain number of years. And maybe we could make some award. I don't know, thinking out loud here.
And remember, this year is the first year that the city has been participating with the Chesapeake Bay Trust.
Yeah.
We're using watershed restoration fee money to fund. We put in $300,000 this year to fund projects, and we've selected several, and they are on private property that pre-exists stormwater requirements. And these are, and one in particular I'm thinking about, an apartment complex or it might be a condominium complex, would address the impervious surface there, because they have no stormwater controls and they're right on the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to, that partnership with Chesapeake Bay Trust is like a very good process of sort of addressing what you're talking about, because it sort of like removes staff from necessarily having to. One of the problems that we run into going the other way is basically the bandwidth of staff to sort of oversee all these projects. But working with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, it gives a way for us to fund reducing the intensity of impervious surface with projects that are sort of like well thought out and executed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions on this? Any? Yes.
Just something that we need to put on the radar and is, this all, it's a touchy subject, but the off-street requirements, I know there's movement to reduce off-street requirements. In other words, to reduce parking off-site and asphalt. But then again, it's a very controversial issue because then where are they going to park? But this is to prevent the giant parking lots. And I was going to ask Sally, where we are with that, because didn't you hear that we're looking at that to reduce parking requirements? I don't want to call her.
I think it's been mentioned over the years. I think that'd be good to
look at.
Certainly, because I think a
lot of cities are doing that now, just reducing off-street parking.
Living right next to the Giant, that parking lot's never.
Yeah,
even near
that's an
capacity.
example of the zoning code.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something
It
we
would
should
certainly
look
be
at.
good to update that. And so thank you for your time. And that's just to let you know, that's something, I don't plan on introducing anything in the remaining time in this term, but for next term, I do want to look at the stormwater code and sediment control just to kind of see if there are ways we can improve it even further. I just want to keep getting updates from you on this stormwater fee as well to see if there are any other tweaks we might want to make to it.
Sure, and we do, we appreciate that, and definitely I think that our stormwater code could use some work. So we look forward to working with you on that. And I will check on the items that you mentioned and give you a report back.
Okay. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nash, you're up.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am here with our monthly update. And the exciting thing is that 39 Hudson Street, the location of the Public Works garage, the permits are under review, but getting very close to approval. We'd like to get that project moving. Our other projects for updates, nothing much too new. We're looking at some changes at 110 Compromise Street to a different restaurant that wants to go in there that I think I mentioned last time. Kitty Academy on West Street is getting very close. I noticed they have a sign up that they're taking applications. This is a daycare on West Street. Parkside Preserve continues to be under construction. And that's pretty much it, unless you have any questions for me.
I know I have a few. I guess it sounds like nothing much has changed. But getting into Ward 1 territory, that the bank restaurant, is that still moving forward, or?
We saw the article in the paper yesterday, so we're not exactly sure what will happen because of that. So we just will have to wait and see.
Yeah, I noticed.
We've reached out to the architect to get see if he has any information.
Okay.
With workers were working yesterday for what it's worth, but that's a good sign.
But yeah, sorry, I guess getting back to environmental specific, Parole Place, has that forest conservation plan been approved?
I
that
have to
under
check with
review?
Tom, but I don't think it has been approved yet. I don't think they have had their public meeting.
Okay, yeah, how were the public meetings were they being held virtually or during the pandemic? Or?
We did a
on
couple
hold?
virtually, I think one or two. So we probably can think about having them in person again, or it might be more convenient to keep them virtual for a little bit longer, since all of our advisory boards and quasi-judicial boards are remaining virtual as well for the foreseeable future.
So I don't know if the committee would be interested at all in getting maybe just a concept plan or overview of some of the larger projects. I'll have to look up the Parkside Preserve, but I know that's going to be one of the larger projects in terms of potential forest disturbance and steep slopes and whatnot. It may be nice to have a visual at some point from yourself or Mr. Smith.
I'm kind of thrown on Parkside Preserve. It's under, where in construction is it?
I think-
Seriously.
Parkside Preserve or Parole Place?
No, Parkside Preserve.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Where is it in the schedule? I mean, as far as construction, what?
Their permits, they have some permits. They still are in the process of getting other permits approved, but they've
Okay.
begun to do some initial site work.
Yeah. And are there substantial erosion control measures that they have to do?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm yes, Alderman.
Thank you, Dr. Nash. I have 4 different properties to ask you about, starting with 424, 428 4th Street, and all of the fireworks that my blast email apparently generated. That has come back from Circuit Court,
That's right.
and the Circuit Court upheld 2 of the findings outright and asked for further clarification, which I believe the chair, we received it from Jackie Rouse on the 6th of June. The chair, I think, explained the process. Is that
That's correct.
the end of that?
Well, so that will go back to the court. However, we also currently have, so then they came in for a modified site plan to meet what the board had approved, to meet the requirements of what the board had approved. That site design was approved, and now there is an appeal on that site design, and that is going tonight for the second time to Board of Appeals.
To the Board of, okay, so it's still slogging along. The lofts at Eastport Landing, is that still in Circuit Court, the appeal filed by the applicant?
Right, I don't have any updates on that.
That seems so strange, because I thought we were getting close to everything being sorted out with the APF. Well, that's their choice. I thought we saw pretty exciting, I know it's far from being complete, but a pretty exciting proposal for 181 workforce housing units at Rocky Gorge. Do you think the Planning Commission discouraged them, or will they come back?
They did not seem discouraged, although I was glad that the Planning Commission notified them of several significant
Oh, yeah,
hurdles.
I thought they were straight up. I thought it was very good counsel, but I'm mindful of 2 of our colleagues who have very strong opinions about workforce housing. It seems this is one location, and the old public works site is another, where the city can take a very direct hand in providing some affordable housing kinds of options. I would hope they could come back with a slightly attenuated plan with more public space, as was suggested. I think the big rub is going to be the access onto, but I kind of agree with Alex. I think that having a stoplight there and slowing traffic down, I just came back in on that today, much earlier. In fact, I don't think it should be 55 miles an hour at all. I know it's state road, but slow it down when you get to where Aristide connects to Forest. I know Alderwoman Finlayson is very interested in the workforce housing project, and she very much believes that slowing traffic on Forest Drive to 30 miles an hour which means people will probably only do 50, as opposed to the current speed limit. And slowing down on Aristide Allen before they get into the cross-traffic streets earlier, I think, is a good idea. But it feels like this is an opportunity where we can be responsive to the mayor's goal, certainly two of our colleagues' goal for workforce housing, this and the other, the site for the old public works. So I'm hoping they'll come back. I think that was a good first start, but
Well, one of their first stops will be to council because they have a few legislative things they need. So
okay.
you'll
Well,
have an opportunity to support them.
Some of us want to hear more from them. I'm not saying we're approving, but I thought it was pretty exciting.
What kind of legislative things do you think they need?
They need to, I believe they need to amend their annexation agreement. I believe that they need a rezoning or
that's right.
either a map amendment or a text amendment.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple thoughts on this one. I mean, in terms of the traffic, I'll have to respectfully disagree with my colleague here. Before the pandemic, at least, I used to commute that road every day, 665. And I think it would be a challenge if you had a light there, because that's right where 665 starts to back up in the evening. And then it also backs up with the Route 2 exit, the ramp all the way back up. So if you push that back up, essentially farther up the road, you potentially risk combining that back up with the backup at Route 2. I just think it might be, there's a lot to look into, I think, on
Well,
the
there is
state
a
level.
lot, but my good friend Alex Klein would say you should be bicycling, not riding your car.
If there was a bike path all the way to end showers, I'm happy to do it.
Two other things.
But if I could on
sure.
that project as well,
Yeah.
but there's one there. So I didn't have a chance to tune into the presentation, but I'm guessing one of their other challenges is going to be the forest conservation. So are they going to need, I'm presuming they're going to need to submit a whole new application for that and comply with the no net loss.
There's no forest left.
Well, some of it's regenerating. It's kind of, I think they need
And
to go out
they're
there and do a
also
new
proposing
delineation.
disturbance in areas where the current Rocky Gorge proposal didn't propose disturbance. So they will have to basically just start over from scratch.
Okay. Because that was tough because they have,
But they are keeping a lot of green space. That's what I saw in the plan.
I haven't seen the proposal yet.
Yeah, no,
But they have a lot of number of different streams back there too, which is one of the and steep slopes, I think, which is the problem with the challenge of the first proposal. But I just wonder, have they done anything in the city before development in the city?
Well, we have worked with their attorney before, and their project manager we have also worked with on another project. They're not as frequent of a team that we that we see all the time, but we are familiar with them.
Okay.
I just think, given the pressures of workforce housing, I do think they're going to, so for a zoning change, they either have to prove that the conditions have changed, or that there was an error with so that's a tough thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Or it can come in with the comprehensive plan if that fits in their timeline.
Yeah.
But I'm fairly certain no matter which approach, they also still have to prove that there's going to be no environmental degradation, and that's going to be the challenging point. Because I mean, that's usually factored into the annexation agreement and also the comp plan, but.
But I think it's progress, and it's moving to respond to an area that I can't quite get I guess we'll hear more about it tomorrow when the housing group reports, but I keep looking at data that says there's all kinds of vacant affordable housing opportunities, up to 400. So I'm really going to be looking forward to see the data. I know someone who is out on the Hastings is saying we need 3,000 new affordable housing units in the city. I'm kind of wondering where they're going to go. And I certainly hope that person isn't thinking about putting them all in Ward 8. But that's about a 6,000 increase in residents. And we've been growing at about 100 families per decade, not 6,000. So that's pretty radical change. But I do think there is certainly a hue and cry, and there are economic and social reasons for supporting affordable housing. I just think that it needs to be done with good planning, which is why I'm talking to you.
Absolutely.
I had two more. One is the SAYC fence. Is there, and I did meet with Brett Anderson on Friday to talk about things. I'm assuming that the final fence permit will still have to come in and be approved, right?
We are expecting in the next day or two the minor site design and revisions to the fence permit.
Okay, good. The last one, and I want to make sure I heard this clearly yesterday, and it makes a big difference to me. I thought I heard the Maritime Task Force say that the 15% additional non-maritime is 15% of the existing buildings, or new buildings that would be added, at least 15% could be non-maritime. So it's not 15% of the entire, like for Rod's, the entire 17 acres.
Oh,
It's 15%. I think that's a misunderstanding that I was carrying, and I think that it is something that I will, if I'm correct, if I'm understanding that correct, want to take back to my constituents who are not so excited about maritime zoning changes.
It's actually even more restrictive because it's just existing enclosed space. So existing gross floor area, 15% of that space. So if you build a new building the day after the ordinance is approved, you don't get 15, it doesn't, that space does not count towards your total.
And is the 15% carte blanche, or is it because of triggers?
Well, depending on what zone you're in, because some zones you can already have some non-maritime uses. So
Just was talking to one of their lawyers before I came here.
So this would be added on to that. But let's say it's WMI, it would be the 15% with which you only get with the triggers. But then you may get able to get a couple of additional percentage points with the incentives, which are more like the big game changers, big contributions to street and parks or public access or something along those
So
lines.
I didn't hear the incentives discussed yet.
They didn't really talk about it. Mike Tomasini mentioned it a little bit, but he
I
didn't
was
go
kind of
through
hoping
it.
they were going away, but we'll see.
I think it's a minimal increase that they would get from those.
Well, I thought many
They're
of the
not
people.
big increases.
Yeah, all right. So do we have any sense of where we are in terms of legislation and legislation being introduced?
I know that Eileen is working on it and has a rough draft. I think it's in okay shape, but I haven't
Well,
seen
I would like to encourage, particularly for the three of us, who are three of the four waterside, that the sooner you can give us an inkling of what that's going to look like, the more comfortable I'm going to be feeling about things.
Okay.
But I do think that the presentation yesterday was useful, if only for that clarification on the 15%. So that was helpful. Got a little bit of my indigestion settled back. That was it, but thank you for all those updates.
Yes, Alderman.
Yeah, just two questions, and just to segue back to the maritime, I was curious on why restaurants were referred to in a square foot capacity versus seating. You know, your language with restaurants is always seating, right? Planning and zoning definition, kind of. And I'm thinking that might be because of the concern about footprint, and you know, you're basically telling a restaurant person, hey, this is the square footage you have, you know, versus, you know, you can't really define scale with number of seats. Right? Maybe I'm answering my own question.
I think that is a good reason. Also, I think it is because in the Maritime District, there's a lot of focus on the square footage of space.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of things are limited just in square footage to 1,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet. Right. And so I think that's carried over. But the square footage will limit the number of seats. So there is a
they go hand in
relationship,
hand.
and maybe it's a better way to control bulk than through
Yeah.
seats. But
Yeah, I think so. You made a comment I was curious about on the affordable housing, unless they get in the comprehensive plan. What did you mean by that? Is that what? I didn't
so
understand
in
that.
Maryland, there's a couple of ways you can rezone your property. And one is with a local map amendment where you have to show change in the neighborhood or an error in fact of the law when your property was zoned. But you can also get rezoned after a sector study that shows, this is the zoning here and this is what it should be and this is why, and the sector study gets adopted, or after a comprehensive plan, same thing, where it looks at a big picture, what's happening demographically, economically, in terms of land use, what do we need to adjust in the next 10, 20 years. And the city has always done rezonings with sector studies, but after this comp plan, I would like to do a comprehensive rezoning and make some bigger changes to simplify the zoning code, so we don't have 31 zoning districts.
Yeah.
So maybe 15,
Yeah.
maybe 8.
Okay.
Probably more like 15.
So what
or
governs
more,
the
but at least simplified.
The comp plan governs over the sector study then?
The sector studies are always adopted as an amendment to the comprehensive plan,
Okay.
but you can do it either mechanism. So we're looking at the form-based coding idea, and if we do that, then that would be a big citywide change. And we
Yeah.
probably wouldn't apply it everywhere, but in a lot of our commercial districts is where we're
You're
looking.
going to start blending colors.
Yes.
Does that mean we'll lose the R3 NC2?
Well, I don't know, because when you start delving into the details, you see how the differences are in the different conservation zones. But maybe R3 NC2 3 could be combined with R3 NC2.
Good.
Well, I want to go back to a comment from Alderman Arnett. The affordable housing issue, in that I think you really made a good point in terms of what we really need is good planning. And I think in many ways, I'd really rather see that vision and even the density and that so on and so forth be determined more so by staff than by the developers' dreams, or frankly, some of our colleagues who may think they're planning professionals. But so, because I think there are a lot of things to factor in besides the transportation, but in terms of environment, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make the meeting tomorrow, but if this comes up, one of you be willing to ask it. But my concern about just focusing too much on increasing density of affordable housing is that we can often, I think as we potentially have seen in the concept, move to a situation where essentially an environmental justice situation where the new housing, which is going to be affordable for low income, they may not have any kind of open space, green amenities, so on and so forth, which we know has been a factor in some of the public housing in terms of creating a toxic atmosphere. And so I think that's something we really need to be wary of. I think planning and zoning is much more oriented on that than some of the developers who really just want to maximize their profit when it comes down to it. As I am a little concerned in terms of, good to hear there are some local people, but that's one of my concerns about out-of-town developers is I feel like they're a little less vested in truly building a community. So I think it's really just something we need to be wary of and if there's anything we can do in terms of putting, in terms of in the comp plan or something separately the council can do to kind of help empower staff to be able to lead with your vision
Right.
more.
We're pretty dedicated to making sure you can't tell from the outside that a project is affordable housing, that it looks like another, this project down the street, that's not affordable housing. So
Right.
we're pretty committed to that.
That's good. And I know you're all very conscious of the environmental factors as well. Alderwoman?
I was really impressed with Eric's presentation of how we're dealing with the Spa Road site because there's different ideas and we really haven't come to a conclusion. But what I'm really, concerned about there is logically the remediation is going to be a lot of money. And so the developer would have to absorb that cost. And then the question is, what is his performer? Is he going to do? You know what I mean? There's a economic decision there on whether or not workforce housing is affordable. I mean, I hate that. I would hate to have that as a deterrent, that remediation cost hurts the effort to put workforce housing there. You know what I'm saying?
The remediation of those fields.
I don't know how much that is. It's just a big dollar
Yeah,
item.
I don't think we know.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
I think, a large part out of our control because that's going to be state mandated. I mean, they'll have some forest mitigation, but I think as Dr. Nash will probably
Yeah.
attest, you can really address a lot of that through proper design, I imagine, by incorporating
really-
more trees. And,
Yeah,
but I
that's
think
why
we'll have to partner with the school too on some of those.
I mean, I would love it to be open space and be sort of a dedication to parole.
Central
there's-
Park of some
I think
kind,
it should be a bike park,
Yeah.
dirt bike.
All right, I want to try to get out by 4, and we have a few more things. But Alderman, you want?
Yeah, there've been two recent big purchases in Ward 8. One is Mears Marina, and the other now we saw in the paper, Nautilus Point or whatever they're going to call it. I talked with you probably about a year ago about putting in more specific height limits in 2150. Should I be coming back to that? Because if the owners of Mears in the rest of the world have big condominiums surrounding their marina, and I don't think the Nautilus Point are talking about changing the buildings, which are already higher than 45 feet, but I am concerned about us, and it's a point that Tom makes all the time. In a built environment, if you want more density, the only way you can go is up. One of the things that constituents are worried about is being walled in. And so maybe we can schedule a time. I want to talk more fully about that. I didn't think you were enthused with it when we talked about it the last time, but I think more and more things are coming that make me worry that we should pay some attention to it. And I'm saying this to my colleagues as well.
Right, and I actually think we're headed more in that direction with the form-based coding because we're really focusing on people scale, and that's not much more than 4 to 6 stories if you want human scale development. So I think it's something that would probably fit in with a lot of the discussions we're having now with the comprehensive plan.
So I was just on Capitol Hill this morning, and I used to live there for 10 years, and I was marveling at it's dense, but it is 2-story. I mean, it's very human scale. So it didn't feel like you were being crowded in, even on Pennsylvania Avenue or some of the bigger thoroughfares. That
Remember
human
that
scale
when you
just
talk to
makes so
Harvey
much.
Blonder.
Pardon me?
Remember that when you talk to Harvey Blonder. It
I
can be done.
hear you.
There's some nice
I hear
boutique
you. I think
hotels.
you can have a boutique hotel in zone 2, not zone 3. But anyway, well, thank you. I would like to schedule some time. I'll send an email. Thank
Sounds good.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nash, for your time. I'd like to, before we go to Ms. Godd, I'd like to just get these appointments out of the way. They're all reappointments? Are people comfortable doing this as a block?
Approval of all of them.
Well, I don't know about Bev and Bukaiser.
I already made a
Are you
smart
watching, Bev? It's like we can do these in a group, right? Do you think so?
Yes.
Bevan, we love you. Thank you for your service.
We love you, Bevan. We love you, Bill and
Strong
Paul.
leadership on the commission.
But you need to learn to speak up.
Yeah. All right. I heard a motion, I think.
Yes. I
To
made a
approve all?
motion.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor of approving AP 19 through 22, please say aye.
Aye. Congratulations. We should at least say their
Motion
names.
carries. And now, Ms. Godd, if you have a report.
Thanks, Hillary.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Did you have anything you wanted to add? I forgot about you over there. You were so quiet.
Okay, so coming up is the Waterways Cabinet. We've scheduled the next meeting for June the 30th, and I've encouraged the members of the Waterways Cabinet to present to me issues of importance to them that they would like to address with the mayor directly, so I can put those on the agenda. I would like to see this be a more interactive sort of exchange with the mayor and with staff, rather than just providing staff reports and trying to elicit that kind of interaction, so they can bring the issues to our attention that they're most concerned with, their suggestions, their recommendation and projects, letting us know what they're doing that we're not aware of and how we can help them. So that's on June the 30th.
Who is on that cabinet?
So we have representatives from our major groups that do actually boots on the ground restoration work: Spa Creek Conservancy, Severn River Association, which now includes the Back Creek Conservancy. It was a merger about a year ago. The Severn River Keeper Program, and the Annapolis Green. Let's see, the Severn River Commission. And then we have representative from this committee, which is the chair, Rob Savage. Currently, we have the chair from the Annapolis Environmental Commission and the Conservancy Board. We have a representative from Weems Creek and College Creek. So we have all the creeks and major rivers represented. In addition, the Arundel Rivers Federation, because the Arundel Rivers Federation includes the South River, and the South River, there's a portion of it within city limits. So those are, and then we have, those are the stakeholder participants. And then for the staff participants, myself, the mayor, the city manager, directors of planning and zoning, public works, and transportation. Excuse me? This will be a virtual meeting. Until July, we're not having other meetings in person. And we may continue those virtually, because we have found with boards and commissions, we're getting great participation with virtual meetings. Yeah. Especially this one is a daytime meeting.
I have a question.
Who
Yes.
represents College and, did you say College and Weems Creek? Or?
College Creek and Weems Creek. So College Creek is Carl Schross,
Oh, I don't know, maybe Fred
he's
does.
also the person who runs Annapolis Compost.
Cool.
And then Weems Creek is Jim Burdick, who's also the representative from the Severn River Commission, because he's now serving as the chair. Oh, and the Fred Sierra Club is also a member.
It's huge.
Okay. The end of this week, our cigarette butt campaign is launching. It's the No Butts in the Bay campaign. You'll start to see cigarette butt receptacles on the street. The new director of the Visitors Bureau asked that we put one outside their area and by the harbor master, so they're having a lot of cigarette butts on the ground there. And we're going to try to put others in areas where we're seeing a lot of cigarette butts on the ground outside of bars, restaurants, like at Main Street and West Street. Some property owners, business owners have already put them out. I know that outside of Acme Bar and Grill, there's one. And there's one behind the building here leading up to the back side of City Hall already. So they will have the No Butts in the Bay our logo on them. There'll be some banners out, as well as signs like the size that you see realtors put out. So just as public education and awareness. Annapolis Green is our contractor on this grant. This is a grant we have to do this from DNR. DNR did a study a couple of years ago and found that the most prevalent form of trash along waterways are cigarette butts. And they are plastic and they don't biodegrade, and that's why they're so important to be disposed of properly. And before you ask your question, some of the all of the receptacles that city's putting out, we're putting out 5 of them, will be collected by Annapolis Green. Every couple of weeks, they're going to check on how full they are. And then the cigarette butts will be sent back to a company called TerraCycle that recycles the butts, the plastic part of the cigarette butts.
Alderwoman?
The good news is we have a cigar place that came in Rome's place was released. How do you handle that? Are we it's great, you have people smoking cigars out on the sidewalk. I'm just wondering where those are cigars.
Right, and they don't have the plastic filter
Yeah, and
that the cigarettes have.
They have to go somewhere.
They do have to go somewhere.
I have to walk by there someday.
We'll
It's
see
really permeated.
if they're being a good citizen and
Yeah, we
having
have to
their
check in.
customers
Yeah.
disposing them.
I'm
I should
sure
walk there with Elvia.
they at least decompose a little
Yeah,
quicker.
yeah.
I
But we
imagine.
don't want them throwing them on the street.
Yeah.
You know, I never noticed a problem when there was a cigar store
Yeah,
there
they must do
before.
something with them. And obviously they have to be sensitive.
Yeah.
And some cigar smokers, you know, they put them out and they save their cigar for later, especially if it's
Yeah.
an expensive cigar.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll make a note of that.
Okay. I'm also continuing working with, on the Resilience Authority legislation and any changes that we need to make there and responding to boards and commissions to address their concerns. Another area where I'm focused on this summer is with converting our fleet to electric vehicles everywhere and anywhere it makes sense, as well as alternative fuel vehicles, as well as working with Department of Transportation on buses and seeing what kind of grants and other funding we can get from the state and federal government for electric buses. As you probably all are well aware, our largest emissions are from the transportation sector, and worldwide transportation sector are the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. So we'll be focusing on that over the summer and into the fall, and developing a strategic plan to get us to all electric as far as possible with our vehicles in the city fleet.
Is that what Dr. I always forget Kwaku's last name.
Dua.
Is that what Dr. Dua is going to be presenting on? He's speaking to us next week?
And the word, yes.
Okay.
And there's some funding out there that
Yeah, it's like an EV transition. I don't know if it's presenting on the actual plan or just general efforts on.
I think
front.
the general research he has and the information he has right now, because we don't have a formal plan yet. We need to create a plan to get there and how it's going to be funded and timelines for it. You know, by X date, how many buses we will have, and then when we will have a fully electric fleet. Also, size of buses is a big component of our emissions. We don't always have full buses, and we probably can get by with smaller buses, which would be better suited to some of our more narrow streets. And depending on time of day ridership, you may deploy a smaller bus, a larger bus at a heavier peak volume time of day.
Yeah, it'd be good to know. Just for my colleagues' sake, I have legislation I'm working on. Obviously, I have to introduce them next week. That would essentially force us. It would adjust the clean energy code we have currently, but basically change that into being an EV goal of a certain time, and kind of having a hybrid be a potential for a bridge between going full EV, but kind of leave it to the determination of the of your position.
Yeah.
Ms. Gild. So, but I'll have to hopefully send that out shortly.
I think in tandem with that, he's going to present, and I'll send out something on this to the Transportation Committee, the transit reports that we hear about, from the M.1 to the one that Rick Gordon submitted. Just so we're all on the same page as far as, I feel like there's conflicting, not information, but conflicting dynamics there, where Kwaku, in working with him the last couple of weeks, there's some obstacles. And so we just need to know, and I think the best way is to have him explain the M.dot plan, the transit plans, and how tied to them we are or we aren't. I don't think I understand that,
Yeah. Well, and I think I look forward to hearing from both yourself and Dr. Dua, because, but I do think the council needs to at some point
our
establish
angle
some
right now.
overarching policy that hopefully is going to be more or less in line with direction staff thinks we can
Right.
go. But I think it's important to have something you've heard me say this before on other issues, but have something enshrined in the code that really sets a clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And just
sure
so you
we'll be accused
understand,
of
I
directing
think you
staff, but we need
understand
to.
that Department of Transportation buses are under their purview.
Right.
The fleet, the city fleet is under the purview
Oh,
of
so
Public
you're-
Works.
okay.
So they're
That's-
two different things.
Right.
You can, yeah, okay.
They could be dealt with separately, like a plan for
Yeah.
both. Separate plan for both.
Don't tell me about it. I live at Park Place now, so the garage,
Oh, that's right.
there they are, the DPW giant extended cab. I mean, those are freaking nice trucks.
And I'm talking about the city fleet includes a lot of just general purpose vehicles that our inspectors use, that our city
Yeah.
arborist uses, that our stormwater engineers
Yeah.
use, that I use, and they're
I mean, they might be hybrids, I don't know,
Yeah.
but they're
right.
big.
And then there are light duty trucks have now become, and it's very, very feasible to convert our light duty trucks to electric. And we're getting more and more different kinds of trucks that are converting over. Then there's another separate electric vehicle issue with the police department.
Yeah, I was somewhere and I saw electric, a sheriff car that was an electric car.
Well, I
That was
just
pretty
saw
cool.
the Chevrolet. I need to send this out to you. I don't have a chance yet, but they have a Chevy Bolt, which we've all heard of, but they now have a model specifically for police use.
Right.
However, it's for light. I forget how they phrased it, but it's basically for the light police use, like traffic enforcement
Inspectors,
and,
whether
parking inspect. Yeah,
now, there are
enforcement.
vehicles that can be retrofitted for pursuit vehicles as
Yeah.
well, and many cities have converted over in the process of converting to there's pursuit vehicles. Motorcycles, there's EV motorcycles. We've heard about in the city of Hagerstown. They have them. They love them. They're very quick and very quiet. So criminals don't hear them coming even.
Yeah.
So there's that advantage.
Well, I'd be happy to try to find money for the police for that at least. But
Yeah. I think once we had a few examples of we started bringing a few in at a time, especially the motorcycles, it could change a lot of the perception of how they can be used effectively. And there's a track record now with other cities using police vehicles that are electric. And also with buses. That was a concern for the maintenance of buses and the reliability. I think there's more of a track record than there was even a year ago. That's how quickly the technology is changing. The other issues I'm focusing on, I'm working with both Public Works and Planning and Zoning, is on mitigation and building resiliency to climate change. Sally and I are meeting, and Eric Lashinsky are meeting with Stantec, who's the contractor on our resilience study, along with the county and USNA, looking at building resilience and stormwater, sea level rise, as well as transportation, a lot of transportation concerns in that study. So we're going to be kicking that off next week. And I'm continuing to work on back to EVs, EV infrastructure with BG&E, and where, based on what we come up with as far as strategic plan for EV vehicles in the fleet, like duty trucks and buses, where we might partner with them or with others. There's plenty of other resources as well to have support for an EV fleet. And whether or not we need to build some of that into next year's budget. And those are the major things I'm working on right now.
okay. Any questions for Ms. Gobb? Yes, Alderman Wright.
So you've been in the job for a while. Is it working out? Are you feeling like you have access to all the different department heads and carry the environmental message across the city?
I do. I think, the focus has changed, and the resilience and sustainability across, for example, I just mentioned the Stantec study where I'm working with OEM, DPW, and Department of Planning and Zoning, all three of them on that, as well as the comp plan. I've been working very closely with Eric and Sally on the comp plan, and forest cover and canopy and green spaces being so important. Again, I'm still working with Brian Adams, who used to work for me, but now he's in Planning and Zoning. So I'm working with Planning and Zoning on the preservation of green spaces, forest cover, forest tree canopy, preservation of trees. Quickest, easiest, and most cost-effective way to perform carbon capture and lower our temperatures in the city, as well as reduce stormwater runoff and erosion. So Replant Annapolis is one of the programs we've introduced on Earth Day. I'm working with Brian on that. So yes, I mean, it's working. I'm 8 months in right now. I think one of the biggest hurdles and the things I'm getting, I'd say the public and our boards and commissions to get used to is that I am not the person to go to for some of the environmental issues. They contacted me in the past. It's more efficient. I've been directing them straight to the city arborists, straight to planning and zoning, stormwater engineers, straight to the people in planning and zoning, rather to come to me to solve problems for them or to identify resources. So, with any kind of transition like that, I expected that would occur, and I think we're moving more towards allowing me the time to deal with these larger, high-level policy-making, program-making, strategic planning that we need on resiliency and sustainability. One example of was that I researched and helped put together for our Office of Law to consider was our climate change litigation. That started with me, figuring that out, doing the research, looking at different law firms, what other cities were doing, as well as an amicus brief we filed in support of the SAFE rule, repeal of the SAFE rule, which was a Trump-era administration rollback of vehicle emission standards, starting with the California standards, which Maryland adheres to as well as several other, probably about 12 other states or more. So those initiated with me, so I'm looking at things on kind of a larger scale.
So some of the responsibilities from the office carried over, it's just you and Racine, right?
But it's just me and Racine, yeah.
Is that enough?
No, it's not enough.
All
So
right.
I'm looking at other ways to cover some of the work, whether it's through interns or grants where I can hire somebody on a contract basis, or come up with a plan. We might identify with a strategic plan for even the EV infrastructure, someone we might need to hire, even if it's a part-time hire.
Mm-hmm.
So explain what you've been trying to shift to keeping the high 10,000 foot level,
Right.
and some of the changes to the MS4 to help.
Right.
Go
So
that
rather
direction.
than be as involved, I already spoke to David Gerald about this and the directors of Public Works and Planning and Zoning about some of the things that we have on our plate currently that can be shifted off. For Public Works, Racine was very involved with, the grant applications that nonprofits make, and they come to the city first and they want to vet it with us and talk about the technical pieces of what they're trying to do. That's really not
For the stormwater
It's
grants.
for stormwater grants. So if a nonprofit wanted to do a water restoration project, stream restoration, what have you, that's not really her area of expertise. So she does not need to be as involved with those projects as our stormwater engineers or some of our civil engineers need to be involved. She can't answer those kinds of questions. She's not an engineer. Now, she is still tracking where the projects are in the pipeline and getting the updates. So our office is taking that approach. Is we want to know when there's a grant application or someone's considering a project, we'll be involved at that stage. And then when they get to permitting or they're in design or they're funded for design, we have like a master list and ask Planning and Zoning and Public Works to update us on, and we provide that to everyone. So we know where everything is, and that way, if I get a question from the public or the mayor or from you, we can answer it. And also when there's a glitch, something's not moving the way it should, then I can get involved with it at that point.
Alderwoman.
I remember you were explaining that it's a traffic cop. That's how David Jarrell explained your job. that,
Right.
You get people from point A to point B. Who's tracking our points, our stormwater projects to get state points? Is that stormwater credit? What's the acronym I'm looking for?
On the MS4 permit.
Thanks.
And
Yeah, and
our credits for that, yeah.
Who does that? Because
So that's Public Works. So that would be Mike Johnson overall.
Okay, so it's not, Racine is not
So
involved in that.
so that's one, I'm getting to that point of it, she was involved with a lot of the
Yeah, 'cause she was
outreach and
certified or
education and staff training and part of the IDDE. And that, I talked to Mike Johnson about making that part, now that we have two stormwater engineers, he has the
Right.
capacity now
Right.
to send some of that work elsewhere. And Racine was working on several education projects and the public education projects. She will wrap those up, but once she does, Public Works will have a framework to update those programs in the future and add to them, and we will hand that off to Public Works. To
So
handle.
what is Racine's focus? I mean, she's the day-to-day stuff. I don't know.
So Racine, like, for example, currently she's working on the city's update to our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We also have a resilience project centered around sea level rise and climate change, and we decided to pick EV infrastructure because that contributes to carbon emissions and climate change, getting our EV fleet conversion. So she's helping me with that as well. When we put in the project application for Hawkins Cove, she provided support for me in gathering information on those. So she's an extension of me on many projects.
Where is she? Where is her department, her office?
Her actual office is still in Gorman because we don't have the space
I
in
was just
City
wondering.
Hall for her. Right. Yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately.
So she's doing good. That's what's important.
And
Yeah,
and
and
of course, Racine is in charge of all our sustainability type of certifications that we have, our Bee City and our Wildlife Habitat and our Bird City and Sustainable Maryland. And trying to think if I've left one of them out that we have.
Yeah.
So she makes sure that we're meeting the criteria for those projects. And she's still running those general projects.
Is she LEED certified? Is she do
No.
the LEED certification thing?
No.
Oh, yeah. Wow, she's got a lot on her hands.
Yeah, and I think it's worth emphasizing though why, I think offloading some of the stormwater requirements or duties from Racine's position and shifting them because we did hire another stormwater engineer.
Yeah, that's a
and so it's
good call.
They should have the capacity to absorb those duties, but I think that's good because it allows her to provide more
Yeah,
direct support to you and
Right.
and better
the-
projects. That was the goal. Better
Right.
projects.
And then now she's also, because Brian Adams had been the staff support to the Conservancy Board, but now he's in planning and zoning, but yet I still have that staff support liaison responsibility. So I've shifted Racine into that position, and I had been working closely with the Conservancy Board in identifying green spaces to put in our connected green corridor that we were building, and working with Sean Wampler on the GIS mapping of that. And I've turned that all over to Racine. So she's taking on the Conservancy Board, and she's also the staff liaison to the Environmental Commission.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. Scott? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the
You're
report.
welcome.
And anything else for the good of the order?
Second?
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
So are